Good morning. Welcome to the Action Track 2, Learning and Skills for Work, Life, and Sustainable Development. I'm Dr. Shireen Chaya. I'm the Program's Technical Advisor at Dubai Cares, and it's an absolute privilege to be here today. Our session will discuss the key components and needed actions for transforming education to empower learners in all stages of life for well-being, the future of work, and planetary sustainability. With the aim of mobilizing commitments from member states and stakeholders across the world in the lead-up to the UN Transforming Education Summit in September 2022, this session will inform the discussion paper of Action Track 2, as well as the Secretary General's Summit Summary and Calls to Action. Today, we will begin with an overview of the Action Track 2, followed by two panel discussions looking at the key elements of transforming education and how it can be achieved once and for all. Today's session will be held in English on Channel 1, French Channel 3, and Spanish on Channel 2 for both our live audience here at the UNESCO headquarters and those joining us online by webcast. It is now my pleasure to invite to the podium His Excellency, Mr. Tetsuya Kimura, Ambassador Economic, Social, and United Nations Management Affairs, Permanent Mission of Japan to the United Nations, who will present an overview of the Action Track 2 on behalf of the two member state co-leads, Colombia and Japan. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Chaya, for a very kind introduction, and Excellencies, distinguished participants. My name is Tetsuya Kimura, Ambassador Social, Economic, and UN Management Affairs Permanent Mission of Japan to the UN in New York. I'm honored to make the presentation today on behalf of all our partners, in particular the co-lead country, Colombia, and our Vice Minister for Education, Mr. Yoshimoto, is with us in this room to listen to the important discussion today. This action track comprises three key sub-themes. First, foundational learning. Two, skills for employment and entrepreneurship. Three, education for sustainable development, ESD. The Action Track 2 is co-led by two member states, Colombia and Japan. The UN support team has been set up with UNESCO as the anchor agency and ILO as the alternative, and along with UNFCCC, UNICEF, UNEP, UNECE, UNITA. We also have as our stakeholder co-leads World Skills International and UNESCO, as well as 260 plus stakeholder organizations involved in the process. Action Track 2 reflects on these questions and how to empower learners for well-being, future of work, and planetary sustainability by mainstreaming education for sustainable development. We have three key questions. First, what elements are critical to transform education? Second, what are key policy intervention practices? And how can we strengthen international cooperation? To address these questions, we held three consultations, one with member states and two stakeholder consultations. We received extensive written feedback. The final draft is to be submitted only on July 15, including feedback from this pre-summit to inform key elements for the UN Secretary General's call for action during the TESS Summit this September. It is important for education to reflect current context and challenges. For example, the existential threat of climate change, mass loss of biodiversity, natural disasters, pandemics, extreme poverty and inequalities, rapid technological change, and violent conflicts, among others. These challenges disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, exacerbating already existing inequalities and suffering. For example, it is estimated that in 2020, more than 770 million people still lacked basic literacy skills, 2/3 of whom were women. Nearly half of 100 countries reviewed by UNESCO had no mention of climate change in their national curriculum frameworks, although young people are frightened about their future due to the climate crisis. In addition, the world of work is rapidly changing, and unemployment and inactivity are affecting youth in particular. Reskilling and upskilling will be vital to take up opportunities such as 85 million additional jobs that are expected to be created by 2030 in green transition. So, what is the role of education in addressing these challenges? Let us reflect on what the fundamental purpose of education is. First, the question of empowering learners for human and planetary sustainability reminds us that the ultimate purpose of education is to prepare us for life. Second, education is about balancing learning to be and learning to live together with our current preoccupation on learning to know and learning to do. Third, the 2030 agenda also makes calls for integrated approach to development to leave no one behind. Lastly, efforts must be made to ensure that curricula and pedagogies support knowledge, skills, values, and actions for just and sustainable economies and societies, including environmental and climate action by mainstreaming ESD. So, what should transforming education look like? Our approach is to focus on individuals as agents of change. That is a human-centered approach. To advance SDGs in every corner of societies, a whole society approach is also critical. We also recognize that the twin transitions towards digital and green economies will result in job losses and uncertainty for a segment of the workforce, as well as the creation of new opportunities. In order to achieve this transformation, there are key policy interventions, game changers, and practices. As you can see, there are 5 elements. First, robust lifelong learning. Second, promotion of a whole institutional approach. Third, evolving skill demands in changing economies and transition to green and digital economies. Fourth, ensuring inclusion, equity, and justice. And lastly, stronger governance and financing. These are key factors to empower learners for well-being, future work, and planetary sustainability. We regard education for sustainable development, ESD, as a cross-cutting perspective to address those 5 elements in this action track. Here, we showcase some examples of the good practices around these elements from various countries around the world. In Japan, ESD is mainstreamed for all levels of education, from preschool to upper secondary. This direct contributes to national initiative for ESD for 2030. Under building and implementing robust lifelong learning policy and systems, we have examples of the academic credit bank and personal learning accounts in the Republic of Korea and France. We also have the School for Street Walking Children's project in Afghanistan, which offers street walking children opportunities for inclusive foundational education. Lastly, how we can strengthen key policy interventions building on existing regional and global partnerships is a critical question. Here on the slide are some examples of initiatives, coalition networks, and platforms that promote learning skills for life, work, and sustainable development. They are categorized by using different colors in accordance with the sub-theme of Action Track 2. Most of these global initiatives and partnerships cut across the sub-themes. I will only highlight 2 of them. First is the Global UNEFOC Network, which consists of institutions specialized in technical and vocational education and training, It provides an environment for exchange, cooperation, and mutual assistance for its member UNEFOC centers. The second is ESDNet 2030, which is a new global network that aims to implement the ESD for 2030 framework and its roadmap by providing a platform of exchange and collaboration of member states and stakeholders through the country initiative. And here we make key recommendations along these elements. For example, we call for implementation of ESD for 2030 framework and roadmap, which is the guide for countries on mainstreaming ESD, and for whole school approach to learning, emphasizing the need to focus on institutional innovation and linkage to industry, as well as capacity building for teachers. Member states should support each other in their implementation by strengthening global networks. We recommend that to meet skills demands in changing economies, we need to monitor socio-economic trends to understand skills demands by each sector, including emerging ones such as green skills, and emphasize the importance of recognition of prior learning and the recognition of different knowledge systems. We should invest more in people. We also recommend ensuring that learning needs of all individuals are met with attention to the disadvantaged, including persons with disabilities, refugees and displaced people, those living in rural or remote areas, people from linguistic minorities and elderly. And finally, to realize this, we recommend leveraging existing networks, global instrument frameworks, to mobilize additional resources and expertise to support policy development and implementation. Synergies among global instruments should be strengthened by sharing clear targets and strategies. I hope this presentation has shed some light on the key aspects of transforming education, and hope it helped to inspire our discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the enriching overview of the progress of the action track and the vision for transforming education drawn from the extensive consultations. This is truly a great point of reference and the best start to our important conversation today. Building on what has been achieved so far in the action track, let us now dive into the key questions of the session, which will involve both our live audience with us here today and our online audience following us through webcast. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to an interactive tool we'll be using today. I'd like you to go to slido.com and type in the code 67560 or point your camera onto this QR code on the top left and follow the link on your phone. I hope you're connected. I'd like to invite each and every one of you to share your answer to the following question. What is necessary to transform education in order to empower learners in all stages of life for well-being, the future of work, and planetary sustainability? We look forward to your responses. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our two young and incredible panelists who will be joining me on the stage as we delve deeply into this question. Ms. Daria Chekalskaya is a younger representative, Climate Investment Fund's youth consultant, and a climate change communicator from Russia. And Mr. Hamid Kayode Alabi is founding executive director of Kayode Alabi Leadership and Career Initiative from Nigeria. A warm welcome to our panelists. I'll encourage you to respond on Slido so we can incorporate that into our feedback for today. But beginning with Hamid and reflecting on the views coming from your experiences, in your opinion, what are the critical elements that are necessary to transform education to empower learners in all stages of life for well-being and the future of work and planetary sustainability?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think first and foremost, we need to understand what does education mean, and how can it be a tool to transform our life and an individual. First, education is a lifelong process that prepares an individual for the future and that helps an individual to develop skills, attitude, values in order to solve societal problems. But could we say that the school is actually preparing our students to solve the societal problem today? Probably not. And how can people solve societal problem when they've not developed literacy and numeracy skills that are needed for the future? I mean, the core foundational skills are needed to build higher order cognitive skills in the ever-changing world. And then what happens to children who live in underserved and rural communities, who don't have access to the tools, resources, and opportunities to even change their circumstances, if they can't even read and write? And the basic of success is the ability to read and write. I could recall a friend once said, if you're able to read and write, you have all the tools to succeed. Again, while I won't be focusing on literacy and numeracy skills, I would like us to look at the learning deficiency that is happening in our school today. And what are the learning deficiencies? The environment that students are learning from, especially children in underserved communities. And what am I doing to change this? I started Skill to Rural Boot Camp, an intensive 2 to 5 days boot camp, where children in rural communities and underserved communities identify the challenges and problems in their communities and co-create solutions to those problems using design thinking. So children would identify problems in their communities such as poverty, such as lack of access to quality education, such as climate injustice, and come up with solutions, innovative solutions. And they also have access to mentors who guide them through that process. And from the boot camp, we've seen students who have created drainage system, mechanized farm, community tech labs, mobile clinics. These are children in rural communities that people think they cannot learn and they cannot create things. And these are children who even have low literacy level. So how can we create such programs that can accelerate learning for children in rural communities and prepare them for the 21st century? And this is a kind of experiential learning, right? People learn by doing. So there's no such of like a teacher coming to teach something. They are learning by creating, by using the resources in their own environment. And to end, we should all know that, lastly, we should all know that to transform education, we cannot do it with the readiness and commitment of learners themselves. So we need to constantly engage them beyond one-off intervention and remove barriers that may disable access to complete the puzzle, which is education. This could be ensuring that they have access to scholarships to complete basic and higher education, access to proper meals, providing food vouchers, engaging their parents, and providing adequate mentoring and educational advice. Sometimes skills are not enough. We need to think about other enablers to transform education. So beyond providing skills, we need to provide other supports that complete the jigsaw puzzle of that one child in a rural community in Nigeria. Thank you.
It's incredible that the word that's coming through is youth participation. And you've really inspired us to assess both the meaning and purpose of education. And the best place to start is the natural curiosity of children, as you're doing in the Skills to Rural. We certainly need more of that. And now on to you, Daria. I ask you the same question. What will it take to transform education?
Thank you, Dr. Shireen, and thank you, UNESCO, for providing this space for thoughts, opinion, ideas, frustrations, vision, and hopes. As a young person, I should be honest with you, I am terrified about the future. I'm anxious because we, as a society, we are not ready for 2 degrees Celsius world. We really need to transform education, and we would need to educate not only youth present and future, but everybody. We urgently need to build climate-conscious society. To do that, it requires efforts from all of the stakeholders, governments, multilateral organizations. And firstly, to transform education, we need to be getting ready. We need to scale up our capacity on adaptation, equally as mitigation. Education for sustainable development is not merely about nature. It's not about fancy ways to decrease our carbon footprints. It's about building capacity of people to live in the hotter world within the planetary boundaries. We also need to recognize the strong links between climate change, biodiversity loss, and social inequities to make sure that we teach them in the intersectional manner. Education should be more holistic and foster systems thinking and should be integrated in all subjects at schools and universities. Secondly, in the hyper-connected world, we are super disconnected. Corona pandemic made it worse. Yes, online education is transforming the world, but teachers and students haven't seen each other for years or even at all. Online education should be heavily complemented with interactive tools and hands-on experiences, and educators will be a key role at making this learning experiential. It can be as little as having community gardens, just the one that we have this in UNESCO premises to foster community learning and resilience. Thirdly, education for sustainable development should be embedded in daily life of all people. We need to empower everyone to become part of a solution. We don't need, thousands of environmental engineers like me to foster sustainable development. We need everyone doing their part within their specialization, within their interests, hobby, jobs. That can be achieved if we invest in partnership between, for example, content creators, companies, and multilateral organizations to promote social media use, because everybody is using social media anyways, or another alternative ways of informal education through storytelling, to amplify skill sharing, to foster lifelong learning experiences for people of all ages. Last but not least, as it's also coming really strongly on Slido, youth should be granted the right and equal opportunities to participate fully in the formulation, planning, management, and implementation of government programs for education, conservation, and adaptation. We should enable peer learning and foster meaningful participation. I believe this week's conference and youth inclusion is a good step forward, but we can't afford going with the same steps, with the same pace. Temperatures are rising exponentially. So should our efforts. Thank you.
You bring such an incredibly crucial perspective. We don't need to wait. It can begin with a single seed. I take this opportunity to thank our youth panelists who provided us with their insights and hope that this is the moment we commit. We've heard the voices of youth on the critical Thank you, by the way. Thank you. Another round of applause as they take the stage. So we've heard the incredible voices of the youth on the critical elements that we need. But if we're to truly achieve a transformed future born out of the rewiring of education, then the most crucial question that we need to ask ourselves is, what action do we need to take today, be it policy interventions or practices, so that we can achieve our vision for the future of education? Turning to our audience, I encourage you to continue engaging with us on Slido. In answering this question on the road towards transformation through action, I am joined on the stage by 7 incredible panelists. Her Royal Highness Princess Abzey Jigme, Chair of the Her Royal Highness Princess Abzey Jigme Foundation and Chair of the International Jury for 2021 UNESCO Japan Prize on ESD. His Excellency, Mr. Eng Amgalan Lufsansrin, Minister of Education and Science, Mongolia. His Excellency, Mr. Wenkuni Joel Lionel Bilgo, the Minister of National Education, Literacy, and Promotion of National Language as Member State Representative for the Global Alliance for Literacy. His Excellency, Mr. Marcos Gonzalez, Undersecretary, Ministry of Universities, Spain. Her Excellency, Ms. Anna Brandt, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Sweden to the OECD and UNESCO. Mr. Chris Humphreys, President and Chair of the Board, World Skills. And last but not least, Mr. Jean-François Plat, Head of International Development at PICS. A warm round of applause. Your Royal Highness, we begin this conversation with your incredible insights. What will it take? What is the kind of action that we need?
First of all, dear moderator, allow me to acknowledge the wonderful people in the room and also His Excellency the Ambassador for giving us the insight of the tremendous work that has been done. And really, from the bottom of my heart, what a vibrant input from the youth. When I always say, when you give the space to the youth, the sky is the limit. So, dear moderator, coming to your question, you know, from my work, I was conscious at 14 years old that I was part of the solution and that I shouldn't wait to be seated, but take my seat. And this is part of the values of my education from my grandmother, who passed away at 110. I'm from the Mosi tribe, Mosi Kingdom in Burkina Faso. So education is a key enabler to achieve whatever you want to do. And to reach that point, we need energy. Whatever we do, education here, energy brings us here where we are. And we need to go for energy transition. When the SDG has started, I was already implementing the Sustainable Development Goal with the Mama-led Initiative for Sustainable Energy, who has been awarded in 2015 by the UN Secretary General Assembly as one of the 14 breakthroughs achieving the SDGs. Because, again, from our side, I don't like the word global south because as a technical, when you look up with the satellite, where is, it depends on the angle that you're seeing, if you're global south or global north. So I think that we are solution providers and we can bring those solutions to the world. That is A. Secondly, we are conscious that we need to have to build also our own platforms that we can be ready for esteemed colleagues in the panel here and also outside when they come that they really have already an enabling environment that they don't start from scratch. Also recognizing our capabilities to do so. Burkina Faso, with my initiative Mama-led for Sustainable Energy, presented at UNFCCC process has the best practices where we are already creating a platform to train 1 million youth and women in each participatory country. And this has been adopted by ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy, Energy Efficiency. And this process, we would like, and it's open, and we reiterate and commit here that we open to serve as the part of delivery mechanism for jointly with UNESCO and UNFCCC process. So I will stop there, but I love again to come back and to listen to the fellow. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you. It's truly inspiring to hear of such incredibly successful examples of real action. Your Excellency, Minister Lufsenstern, the floor is yours.
Very good morning, gentlemen. Okay, so thank you for giving us to share our ideas and initiatives and how we can to provide better learning and then to give all the access of the skill for life and work and sustainable development. Okay, so just recently, my country, we have done this national consultations of the pre-summit. And I was quite impressive, the participation of the national consultations, including the youth and children. Okay, my understanding is we need to understand what real gap of the current generations, and we are representative of the different generations, X, Z, Alpha generations, of course. So then really we need to understand what they want to learn and how they learn and what is effective learning is in the place. Okay, so these challenges we are facing, of course, this is not only Mongolia's challenge, this is global challenge. And I do hope in the COVID and pandemic has two sides, not only negative effects created, also the COVID and pandemic created positive sides. Means, and then the COVID gave us the big chance and big opportunity to rethink what is current, the weakness of the current education system and what is the strength of the current education system. Okay, so then big opportunities, how we can handle, how to make the real digital transformation. Okay, so this is, of course, become very global challenge. Then in order to deliver quality education through this transformation, then we have to improve the current curriculum first. This we call the skill-based curriculum. The second one is we have to improve the methodology and how we to introduce this effective learning, because have to change this attitude in the mentality of teachers, current teachers, because generation is changing day by day, month by month, and year by year. It's amazing this changes happening around us, and then we have to realize this change and then to have more practical approach to deliver this skill for life and work sustainable development. And there are a couple of the initiatives in Mongolia, and then also through the private and public participation, and then could be some initiatives become more global and regional benchmark. Because I'm really too happy to share these experiences and ideas and best practice. Okay, so then thank you for having this kind of the very meaningful dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You bring crucial components, empowering youth so that they can shape their future, but also the crucial role of government making the necessary linkages. Thank you. And I think this is a perfect transition to His Excellency, Mr. Marcos Gonzalez. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, yes, thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate in this panel. And I would like to add a new element, maybe. Perhaps the question of what the role of universities can be when it comes to lifelong training and learning, so that we can face up to the challenges that we have as societies, climate change amongst many others. So what can universities do? What can their role be? Looking at this holistic, far-reaching approach to education. So, I would like to just share a few ideas with you with the little time I have at the level of the Spanish government. Now, one, of course, is to introduce all of these education challenges and sustainability challenges into the activities of universities when it comes to research, of course acquiring knowledge, but also not only in terms of having specific classes dedicated to these, but as cross-cutting themes for studies. We also need to recognize, identify and regulate. We need to recognize that universities are centers for lifelong learning. I believe that we still have a very reduced idea, limited idea in our heads of what a university is. We believe that you only go there to get a degree or to get a doctorate, but it goes much further than that. These are institutions that are really close to the community across a country. They have a lot of members of staff, and they can therefore really be actors for change. And we really need to make the most of this. And we need to regulate all of this and make sure that we can use universities as facilitators. And I also believe that we need to create incentives so that universities can really be more focused or involved in dealing with local challenges, for example. It's easy, in fact, for universities to find issues within the local community that they can become interested in. So there's also this idea in Spain that we are developing of a rural campus. That is to say that students can carry out internships in rural or isolated areas. We also need to make sure that we are training young people for specific needs in society. For example, sustainable tourism or fighting against the rural exodus that exists in some areas. And universities also need to be key stakeholders when it comes to issues such as refugees. And so universities can really be actors when looking at real grassroots issues on the ground.
Certainly, as a university professor, I always felt that the lion's share of the conversation is around schools. It's important to engage universities in lifelong learning. Thank you for that. Your Excellency, Ms. Anna Brandt, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the action needed to transform education.
Thank you very much, Shireen, for excellent moderation, and thank you for giving me the floor. Your Excellencies, I'm very honored to be part of this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, good quality education is a human right, and it is actually a prerequisite for any democracy. When we're discussing how to transform education, it must be with the understanding that only a human rights-based approach will drive positive change. This means leaving no one behind, reaching every child, and prioritizing keeping schools open at all times, even during crises. And that is exactly what my country did during the pandemic. Even though this decision was criticized by some, we believe it was the right decision to keep primary schools open with the interest of learning for children and with ensuring the foundational learning. Another practice I would like to underline is that I agree fully with our youth participants that youth need to be involved in decision-making around education. We're fully behind you on that. In our view, there are three key policy priorities that are needed to transform education for well-being, for the future of work, for planetary sustainability, and of course, for us to reach SDG 4. The first policy priority is that curricula at all levels must include the skills needed for both girls and boys to be empowered as citizens. For instance, through comprehensive sexuality education and through education for sustainable development. Because fundamental challenges that we're facing today, such as poverty, such as gender inequality, climate change, loss of biodiversity, and undemocratic advancements are all interconnected. And to tackle these problems, education policies must integrate an environmental, economic, and social dimension. The second policy priority is teacher training. Teachers must be well-paid and well-trained. We must strengthen and support teachers to be able to address complex issues in the classroom and to assist them in using the best technologies available. The third policy priority is lifelong learning. My government has recently, together with social partners, launched the greatest reform package for the Swedish labor market in modern times, enabling workers to study for 1 year to reskill and upskill while retaining up to 80% of their income and not losing their jobs. With a skilled labor force, we are enabling the green and digital transition. Now let me end by underlining how important UNESCO is in all these policy areas. And that's why we're very proud to be a big contributor of funds to UNESCO. I think actually we're the biggest in the education sector. We do this very proudly. We provide unearmarked flexible funding, and we're looking forward to many years of continued collaboration, for instance, in supporting UNESCO's role in coordinating support to SDG 4, also in working with UNESCO on comprehensive sexuality education through the program Our Lives, Our Rights, Our Futures, and, for instance, through working together with UNESCO in supporting girls' education in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Education is a human right, and transformation should mean transformation for all. And we must remember to recognize intersectionality of different components and putting teachers at the center. Thank you. Mr. Chris Humphreys, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much and good morning. As President of World Skills, it's not surprising my focus this morning will be on skills for employment and entrepreneurship. The challenges are clear. Technology is rapidly changing our industries and skills needs. We need to transition urgently to greener economies, greener industries, and greener skills. And traditional career models are disappearing. If education is to provide individuals with the skills to survive and flourish in tomorrow's world, not yesterday's, then we really must make a step change. We must support individuals of all ages to continually engage in personal development and equip them with the transversal skills necessary to enable them to adapt to change. If we're going to make learning genuinely available to all, to reach out to the most distant and disadvantaged, then our systems need to become far more accessible, adaptive, and personalized by incorporating new digital learning approaches and recognizing that globally there is a universal obligation to make technology more accessible to all nations, all communities, and all individuals. It's not a panacea, but it is an essential, powerful tool in any universal, individual-focused lifelong learning system. The best TVET systems are models of collaboration, a partnership between learners, industry, and educators. And young people, young learners, sit at the heart of World Skills. Our World Skills champions are extraordinary advocates of change. Their message, like the powerful voices of Daria and Hamid earlier, is that it is not enough to just talk to young people about the future of education. They must be directly involved as collaborators and co-creators to shape and deliver change. Tomorrow's TVET systems need to be steered by tomorrow's workforce. Indeed, we need collaboration to be brought to a much greater level, and in particular through partnerships for industry. World Skills, through our 27 global industry partners, names familiar to the world over, and a net annual value of over 500 billion euros per year, are supported by literally thousands of industry sponsors and work with us and our 85 national members to drive up skill levels, quality, and relevance. We're actively cooperating with the African Union now to establish World Skills Africa, following the very successful African Skills competition in Namibia earlier this year. And we must take advantage of the growing shift towards self-employment and entrepreneurship and build in our modern curricula and pedagogy encouragement and development of curiosity, strategic thinking, and resilience. We have a Be Changemaker program we run around the world in partnership with Hewlett-Packard, which encourages young social entrepreneurs to succeed and make a difference in their communities. Our 85 World Skills organizations, the national organizations, are powerful agents for change. If you have a World Skills organization in your country, please use it to strengthen your links with industry and establish a stronger and more appropriate TVET system. If you're not a member, then talk to us. In finishing, I just wanted to highlight and quote the words of the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, who reminded us that transformation is not about tweaking, We need radical innovation and change in our approach, and we need it now. Thank you.
Incredible. Transformation begins with us acknowledging the need to unlearn before we're able to imagine the future and plan accordingly. Thank you so much. And now, last but not least, Mr. Plath, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs les ministres, mesdames, messieurs.
Thank you, ministers. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to talk about digital skills. Nowadays, digital skills are increasingly essential in all sectors for working, to communicate, to learn, and so on. These skills are not innate. We talk about digital natives when we talk about young people. That's not entirely true. We do need to learn them. And this is what institutions have to do. Not only institutions that teach young people, but also lifelong learning institutions. Digital skills enable young people to find work, but also become global citizens that can fully participate in societies. It enables them to be capable to responsibly use digital technology, and that's really important. So education centers need tools, they need solutions that will enable them to train people with digital skills. So PIX can be a solution. I'm going to tell you a bit about it. So PIX is an online platform that is accessible to all for free. So you just go to pix.org and you have access to content all throughout every life stage. So you have content that is adapted to digital technology, and so everyone can train, can educate themselves and throughout all life stages. So I think that's important. So it's accessible to everyone, no matter their age, but it's generally from 12 plus. Now it can be for students, but also job seekers, anyone. So there are different levels, so you can either have an advanced content or beginner content, and it's very cross-cutting content. So with PIX you can do three things. You can evaluate your skills and measure your proficiency in some skills. So this is important to identify what you need to work on. PIX can also help you develop skills so you can progress. And I think this is important. And learners are in fact in better place to self-teach, to self-learn. And it also, PIX can also help you develop digital skills that are, of course, essential when reinforcing employability. So these are the three main things that PIX can provide. So it's available in France, it's very widespread in different schools and education centers. Now, it's not only destined to stay in France, it's also available in English, and so it can be deployed worldwide. And it was actually developed with UNESCO. So some countries around the world have included it in their education systems, for instance in Belgium, in French-speaking Belgium, but it also in Togo, in Benin, in Morocco, and Tunisia, and so on. So the ambition for PIX is to grow worldwide and to become a public good, a global public good that can be shared with other institutions, other countries that would like to take on this tool and use it and enrich it and develop it together. And I'd like here to make an appeal to all institutions and member states at this point in a perspective of international cooperation and creating global public goods, and to really take on this tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. You really speak to the urgency of really moving away from the idea that digital learning and digital skills are a luxury, and actually, towards a view that makes it as central as any basic necessity, and the importance of making sure that we don't leave anybody behind. And that can only happen if we commit to widening the pool of public goods. Some of you have already touched on your countries' and organizations' plans for transformation, and building on each one of the interventions that you've made, I'd like to ask you one more quick question. What is one action point that you will concretely do to empower learners for well-being, the future of work, and planetary sustainability?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. I think it's about the works of tomorrow. We need to adapt. And the youth, they're telling us what to do, how to do it. It's a matter of greening up the supply chain, building on existing, international collaboration. And also when we talk about co-creation, comes for me with shared IPR. It's good to work with the universities, but they are solution providers. But how do we protect also their intellectual property rights? This also is important. It's not just only that you bring money, but I may don't have the money, but the creativity is there, and how do we put the IPR on? I think that is something that we can reflect on together. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Your Excellency.
Okay, so I would like to share some initiatives which we have done in our country. Okay, so we just recently reviewed the curricula for all levels of education and identified the strength of and weakness of our current education system. That we have to understand the youth, what they want. Okay, so the most youth and children emphasize the meta skills. Okay, so it means thinking about thinking, learning to learn, emotional regulation, goal-oriented skill, empathic skills are most crucial to recover from learning loss and to be adaptive to evolving society. Okay, so these initiatives we are taking and like to share our experiences. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And reflecting on some of the key words that are coming in from Slido, we're hearing, you know, project-based learning, education for sustainable development, but I think also more crucially, collaboration rather than competition, and an increase in national budgets. What do you think?
Well, I would like also to mention one experience. I think it has a long tradition in some countries, and also now in Spain. It's what we call learning servers. So the idea that, again, talking about universities, no? University students in degrees or in masters, that what they learn, they can use this to just go to the society and have a service. Improve, for example, the assessment for migrants. What they learn in university, they use this with NGOs to get a better information for asylum seekers, for example. This is an example of this, how to combine learning with service to society. And this, I think, this is one experience that I think it's a great potential, taking into account that universities are with all the country. It's a very powerful transformation actor that we should improve.
Thank you. So I want to come back to the sort of fundamentals. Quality education is a basic human right, and governments need to take responsibility to providing this for all children to start with, to give them the foundation to become empowered citizens. And because I know that the pandemic is not over, it's rampant in some parts of the world, and we will probably be hit by another one in the future, I want to share a motto of my education minister, which is, when trying to manage a pandemic, always keep the schools open as long as possible. The schools are the ones that should close the last, and they are the ones that should open the first. Go for shopping malls, restaurants, sports arenas, or whatever, to try and contain a pandemic, but really don't touch the primary schools, because what you lose then is very difficult to catch up on. And I think we saw some really shocking statistics from our Japanese colleague on how many children are still out of school. So this is really fundamental, but I think that right to learn, the right to education should also follow us through the whole life. And the constant urge to reskill and upskill citizens so that they can be part of the transitions that are ongoing now, the green transition, the digital transition. That's also a government responsibility. But governments are not alone. They can work very well with civil society, and of course, as donors, we are partnering with a number of governments around the world in providing development cooperation to help governments actually make sure that they are providing this basic human right to their citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking around the world at the most successful TVET systems, despite many cultural differences, there's one common feature that underpins the best, and that's the concept, the achievement of a deep and sustainable partnership between education, industry, and the learner, a three-way partnership. When we have these in place, then what you're able to see is a system that really can shape and respond to the evolving and changing needs of industry by engaging powerfully with industry employers, enabling the education system and learners to keep pace with industrial change and to raise the quality of training and assessment. Partnering with other nations and exploring issues of commonality and difference to design a coherent system for your nation also adds real value. But in the center of all of this, we will always place the learner. An effective TVET learning program for an individual is a three-way contract between the learner, the employer, and the education system, and it works at its best when the equality of those three partners is most recognized and the individual and the employer are able to achieve both their goals with the active support of the education system. That would be my recommendation for the key focus on changes and development in VET.
Thank you. Mr. Platt?
I would like to emphasize inclusion and taking into account underserved or underprivileged groups. We need to adapt to them, including with our teaching methods and pedagogies. We need to also value non-formal education. It works really well in our PICS classes, and some students and learners that are out of school or in school disengagement, this type of non-formal education can work. Furthermore, migrants that have never had access to education can obtain certifications through PICS, which is sometimes the first ever diplomas that they ever get, and so they feel very valued, and they have more confidence, and they are more willing to really enter the workforce. So we need to really value all forms of education, informal, non-formal, and really focus on cross-cutting skills for these people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We will be opening the floor to take questions from the audience. I'm sure there are many reflections and questions, so please, the floor is now yours, dear audience. Who would like to begin? Really? I was worried we'd have to extend the time. Okay, maybe we'll go to what we're hearing on, do we? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm getting old, I don't see. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zora Yermesh, and I'm here representing Ericsson, a telecom company from Sweden. My question is for our distinguished speakers. how do you see the role of the private sector from your perspective, if I may? Thank you.
Thank you for cracking my mind. I said that the point that I didn't raise is the private sector. Whatever we decide and what we call the blue zone is the green zone is going to implement. And definitely, even we're talking about education as a global common good. So it's also private sector. You have private universities. So I think it's private business as well. But how are we making the linkages between long-term vision and thinking and budgetizing? Because taking your segment of telco, I do know that you had to train your own people because universities couldn't do it. And I think that private sectors always has one step ahead and that we should bring them aboard. Taking my own expertise within the renewable energy, I needed to train the people to grow my business. It's a must. Actually, it's not that we really need to. And thank you for raising that point. And definitely it's part of the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The other question? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, I'm also from the private sector. It's a very interesting topic for us from the private sector because it connects directly to our own pipeline of talent. My question is in relation to something connected to what you just shared, Madam Speaker, about industry-recognized training programs and whether we're moving more towards that and recognizing that we probably don't have to put young people through a 3-year course to be able to get a job at the end. What can we do to mobilize more private sector partners to create these type of very specific, focused learning opportunities that connects directly to jobs? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so of course the education is common will, common good. Okay, so in order to achieve the SDGs, and we have to work closely through the PPP models, right? Public partnership model. Okay, so now is big challenges. I think this is global challenge, how we can make a better, proper balance between the skill demand and the skill supply. Okay, this is a really big challenge. Okay, so then we are living now in an uncertainty area. Okay, so we are trying to teach the kids generation will work, will live after 20 years, 30 years, then is nobody knows, and then what skill can be sustainable. Okay, so means, as I mentioned earlier, my conversation, my speech, and there is the better to understand what is real trend, the need of the skill, they call the meta skill. Okay, so then in this regard, of course, the employees, they play a major role because learners, employees, and education institutions, triangle cooperation, collaboration is better. Once we have better and close cooperations based on the PPP models, and then definitely we have better and proper the skill development system worldwide. Thank you.
Yes, very short. I think, of course, we have to collaborate with the private sector, and not only in terms of having private universities, but collaborating in terms of that the private sector has, of course, in the long life learning demands, and universities, for example, can collaborate with, for example, in the European Union, you have now the debate with micro-credentials, no? With short titles that are very related to concrete needs. And this is something that universities can supply, and also with professors coming from the private sector. So I think there's a great opportunity of this collaboration, not only in terms of having private universities, but incorporating the private sector in the long life learning that universities can also improve.
Yes, I would agree. Clearly, the private sector is key as a partner to ensure lifelong learning, and with the demands that the private sector has in terms of skills and a skilled labor force who has the right technical abilities. I think what I was trying to share before was that we recently in my own country, actually the private sector, the employers' organizations, together with the trade unions and the government, like a triangle, have decided that workers can take 1 year off and keeping 80% of their salaries, keeping their jobs, but for training to reskill and upskill, for instance, on digital technologies, green technologies, and moving out of a job which maybe becomes obsolete through the technological changes that are happening, but actually acquiring the skills of the new jobs that are required by the private sector. So there are possible models here, and clearly the private sector is key as a key actor in these solutions.
Thank you. I would like to say two things to our private sector colleagues in the room. Highly successful, adaptive, innovative companies inevitably invest in the training of their workforce and are conscious more than anyone else of the way in which skill needs are changing and evolving. But I would ask you to do one other thing. I would ask you to work in industry and sector groupings to share that learning with the education system, with the government through the public education system, so that it is possible for TVET providers to update their skills regularly and ensure that the curricula and pedagogy that they offer is of the most advanced and the most appropriate for the coming years ahead. It is too easy for education to fall behind times, and the only way to prevent that is for you as industry and sector representatives to take your role seriously of sharing that learning and helping the education system to keep pace with evolving change.
Thank you. We have room for one more question. I'll be fair to this side of the room.
Thank you. We heard in the last panel about the urgency of addressing the climate crisis and about the role of education in mitigation and adaptation. I want to ask this panel as well, what concrete outcomes do you think this track of TESS can have for quality education in the time of climate crisis?
So I don't want to break the protocol, but I'm for gender balance, and this will be interesting to have a man also asking a question. So this will be just for your question. Can you repeat a little bit? Can you come back to your question? What? But the outcome is just get out of your seat and start implementing, doing the work, walking the talk. I think that we have great example from Sweden, how to do. We had the private sector is ready to come. We have the West Africa Solar Park creating 15 million jobs in West Africa. We are doing. So just join us, come and do the work. And we also welcome the the financial side as well to come on board and to finance, walking the talk, not only on paper, but to definitely go and push the wheel. And also to our politicians, to our parliamentarians, to take the policy measures in the parliaments to allow the implementation. That's what I will, I hope I answered to your question. Otherwise, we continue off.
Perfect. And to be fair, gentleman over here.
Thanks. My name is Arash. I'm with UNHCR. Thanks, panelists, for the great contribution. Talking about learning, work, and sustainable development, how do we make sure through inclusion by all the actors happens for refugees, especially making sure that not only they have access to learnings, but fair work and sustainable development? Thanks.
Sharing mics.
Okay. No, this is, of course, a very important issue. No, refugees is not only a crisis that we have now; it's unfortunately a permanent crisis. And here, as far I'm talking always about the universities. So I come from the Ministry of Universities of Spain. No, here, of course, again, the potential of universities is very important. Not only in terms of access to education for refugees, and there we have big challenges, no? Passport for refugees, etc., but also in terms of connecting these activities with the students, with the national students, or students that are not asylum seekers or are not refugees, but they work with this idea of inclusion. No? I think this is something, again, very important. And we have not only to think about students, no? We have also professors, we have also university staff with their needs. And here the challenge is how to integrate professors and university staff within our high education institutions. No? And I think that now we have an opportunity, no? Because the focus is on the crisis of Ukraine. There are more funds that on other occasions. Now we can use this not only to address this problem, but also to think about this as a real, unfortunately, but a permanent challenge that universities have.
Thank you for that. And I think I would really encourage you to continue engaging with Action Track 2 and the consultations around that and the technical documents. There's also the Framework for Global Education Transformation proposed by Dubai Cares and the Action Track 2. I'd like to thank every one of our esteemed panelists whose insights have left us inspired and energized. And putting it all together, I believe we have a roadmap for action towards transforming education. We heard the critical elements necessary to do it. We've heard incredible examples of concrete action that we're already doing. And we've heard about the various components that need to be part of the system. And we've heard the voices of our youth, and it was loud and clear. The time is now to move out of our silos. Today's discussion will feed into Action Track 2, presented by Her Excellency Ms. Maria Victoria Gonzalez, the Minister of National Education, Colombia, at the plenary session. Updates from the Thematic Action Track sessions and the way ahead, held later today in room 1 at 3:45 Paris time. And the key points raised during this particular session will also be reflected in the final draft of the Action Track 2 discussion paper, which will be submitted by the 15th of July to inform the summit in New York later this year. Before closing this session, there is a small housekeeping announcement. There will be a launch of the Teachers Campaign right after the session, so we'd kindly invite you to stay seated for the next short session. And with this, we come to the end of Action Track 2 on learning and skills for life work and sustainable development. Thank you once again to all our panelists and our participants, both with us here in the room and online. And let us remember that empowering learners for well-being, the future of work, and planetary sustainability needs all of us. The dreams of our children, the hopes of our youth, and the infinite possibilities yet to be written for our great-great-grandchildren demand that we rise to the occasion. We can and will be the generation to rewire education for a prosperous and sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. I know you want to all leave the room, but please just give me just a few more minutes of your time. So please, could you just sit down for 1 second? Please, thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, could you sit down again? It's going to be very, very quick. It's going to change, it's going to mix things up a little bit, let's say.
S'il vous plaît.
Please, if you could sit down. Just a few more minutes, please.
In English? Okay. Okay, everybody. Hello, everyone. Can you just give me a few minutes of your attention, please? Okay, everyone, we are going to start in a few minutes. Okay, please get back to your seats, please. Rejoignez vos places, s'il vous plaît. Okay, so I'll be speaking in French, so feel free to use the headsets for the translation if you need it. Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You can stay with us, you know. Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you today. My name is Munia Benaissa. I'm a journalist and a presenter, and I'm going to be your moderator just for a few minutes. And if I'm here today with you, it's to speak to you about a cause that's very close to my heart and something that we all have in common, a memory that we all share in our lives. And if you're here today, and I'm here today, it's thanks to our teachers and thanks to the knowledge that they passed on to us, but also the confidence that they instilled in us. Now, many of these teachers are role models. They've remained role models for us. We all remember their phrases, things that they may have said, and things that we can still hear in our heads today. We also remember, sometimes quite bizarrely, some of the names of these teachers, even though we often don't remember the name of the person who we just met, for example, at this conference, who just told us our name. So these teachers, you've been speaking about them over the last few days, and often they've played a crucial role in our lives. These teachers who believed in us even when things weren't going that well, and sometimes in the most desperate situations, these teachers believed in us. And other teachers were sometimes harder on us, more demanding on us, because they understood that they needed to push us in order for us to be the best that we could be. So today, I'd like you to remember this period in your life, and that's why we're going to play a little game. It's very simple. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and if the answer is yes, all you have to do is stand up and remain standing up. And it's also for you people following via teleconference online. You can stand up in front of your computers. And I'm also going to ask these questions in English. So, are you ready? Good.
Est-ce que vous avez déjà été...
So have you ever been a teacher? Do we have teachers in the room, former teachers in the room?
Have you ever been a teacher? Do we have any teachers or ex-teachers in the room?
Been a teacher, or do we have or ex-teachers in the room? Okay, thank you. You can stand up. Comment? Vous restez debout. Vous restez debout. Ça...
You can stay stood up, it won't last very long. Have you ever had a teacher that motivated you to do better, to really push yourself?
Okay. Okay. Nice. Qui a eu un enseignant qui lui a...
Who has had a teacher that supported you when you're going through a tough time in your personal life?
Who offers support when you were going through a tough time in your personal life? Okay, c'est pas mal, c'est pas mal. Restez...
It's not bad. You can stay stood up. Stay stood up. Did anyone here have a teacher who helped to answered all of their questions?
All these questions, no matter how simple. Okay, and last question. Quelqu'un a-t-il eu un enseignant?
Has anyone ever had a teacher who helped you understand why it was so important to learn and be educated?
Okay.
This is not bad. We're doing quite well. I'd say 80% of the room is now stood up. Thank you and well done. Just a few more seconds, if you will. So this is a very simple game, and all it goes to show is that teachers have had an impact on us. They have shaped us, and in some cases they even transformed our lives. So thank you for taking part, and really well done to all of our teachers. You can all sit down now. Today, the international community is gathering to launch a campaign. So a campaign that aims to show that teachers do transform education through teaching, through their commitment, through their selflessness, through their investment. And through all of this, teachers transform education every single day. Now, education systems must be transformed too, to better support teachers. Professors and teachers invested in us with nothing in return. And now it's our turn to invest in them. We are calling on countries and donors to invest in teachers through the Transforming Education campaign and the sub-campaign Invest in Teachers. Here's a short video, a few minutes, which will tell you why it's important to do that.
Il va bientôt commencer.
It will begin shortly.
Et voilà.
I am transforming education by making learning fun, practical and engaging.
By combining ancient techniques with the most cutting-edge modern technologies.
I am transforming education by increasing climate literacy among children.
To create international online learning spaces and take action on issues that matter to them the most.
Transforming education. And I am a teacher.
Okay, merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So please join us, join the campaign. You can find more information on the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030 website. International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030. You can share this campaign on social media with the hashtag #TeachersTransform. So today your discussions will go on, but I really urge you to remember these teachers that may have changed your lives, because without teachers, education cannot be transformed. Thank you to you all, and thank you for having stayed. Thank you for your attention, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Action Track 4 session on digital learning and transformation. I'm so pleased to host and moderate this session as a co-lead country for Action Track 4 on digital learning and transformation. For the past months, we have been collectively working on the digital learning and transformation discussion paper, which proposes principles and recommendations on how digital technologies can become a catalyst and enabler of transformation of education that will accelerate the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals 4 and the building of the futures of education we want. This session aims to present a discussion paper and share views on following up actions for multiple perspectives. I would like to thank my co-lead colleagues, Singapore and the EdTech Hub, as well as UNESCO, UNICEF, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and ITU for their support in this process. I also want to express my gratitude to all participants of public consultations who actively shared their comments and helped us shape the main principles and recommendations. But dear friends, before giving the floor to our distinguished guests, allow me some personal remarks and thoughts. As COVID-19 pandemic has so forcefully highlighted, the digital transformation of education is a crucial priority for the robustness and resilience of our educational systems. Digital technologies, however, allow for new modalities of teaching and learning, which, when appropriately combined with absolutely vital in-person learning, can transform the quality of education. Through digital tools, students can have access to high-quality content from around the world and can connect with communities far and wide. Educators can do their work more effectively, and administrators and policymakers can harness the power of data to design better policies. We do all agree that despite the considerable promise of digital technologies to support educational transformation, there are challenges that we have to address efficiently and effectively through policy design and appropriate governance and regulation, especially for marginalized learners and communities. For example, in Greece, in the context of the government strategic planning for the digital transformation of education, the strengthening of the digital skills of the educational community, and the empowerment of vulnerable citizens, the government has introduced a digital care program by the Ministries of Finance, Development and Investment, Education and Religious Affairs, and Digital Governance, which provides a voucher worth €200 for each pupil, student, and university student who falls under specific income and social criteria for the purchase of technological equipment, tablet, laptop, desktop. The program strengthens families and students of a certain income category. Technology, as the discussion paper remarks, is not and cannot be the sole guiding force in our education systems. We should not strive to introduce more technology for its own sake, and we should only introduce it in measures and ways which advance the aim of inclusive, high-quality, and equitable education systems. Indeed, technology can often lead to exacerbation of existing inequalities, both within countries and across them, as the experience from the pandemic has shown. This is the reason why we have to invest appropriately in technology-based solutions for education and ensure that the way that technology is rolled out into classrooms abides by our fundamental values of equity, inclusion, and human rights. These remarks are but some of the many important questions which were raised during the most productive and exciting conversation which took place throughout the consultation process. We are delighted to see hundreds of representatives from government agencies, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, private companies, and other education policy experts join the conversation and help produce such an insightful, guiding, and comprehensive papers. No easy feat. So please allow me to congratulate warmly the team responsible for incorporating and synthesizing all of the different voices. In today's session, we will have the chance to hear from our co-lead country, Singapore, and representatives from EdTech Hub, who will present the discussion paper in greater detail. Then we will have the opportunity to hear from youth representatives, whose voices have been essential in producing the paper with many excellent ideas. Then we will hear from the Honorable Ministers of Egypt, Finland, Guyana, and Uzbekistan, who have also been very active during the consultation process, and we look forward to hearing the perspective from their own part of the world. Then we have representatives from the private sector, from major technology players, Ericsson and Huawei, and last from UNICEF and UNESCO, who have played a catalytic role in ensuring the success of this pre-summit. But with no further ado, allow me now to give the floor to my dear colleagues, Mr. Su Hung Wong, advisor to the Ministry of Education of Singapore, and Ms. Verna Laberhari, Executive Director of the EdTech Hub, who will present the discussion paper. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, colleagues. All of us who have been doing this work believe strongly that, indeed, education technology and access to digital learning resources can be transformative for education. As expressed by our colleague Greece, the point to be made is that education technology has the potential to break down the traditional practices of education, of schooling, of teaching and learning, because technology has the ability to disrupt previous practices, as has been demonstrated to all of us by the COVID pandemic. So the promise of technology in transforming what we do in our classrooms is indeed tremendous. But therein, I think all of us acknowledge that there are indeed also grave challenges as a result of the deployment of technology in education, chief of which is that it exacerbates the inequities of education, especially when those without digital resources, those without access to digital means, will fall further behind. So it is in this context of how digital technology and how access to that technology within education can mean for us, the discussion that we've had thus far distilled our thoughts into a number of strategic ideas, big ideas, which we think should guide our thinking around how we want to move the promotion of digital learning across the board. Three ideas, primarily. The first is that we must focus on the marginalized and the disadvantaged learners. We must try to ensure that they have got equal access to digital learning resources as best as is possible. I think we are all aware that the advantaged students, the students who have it, who have got the resources, including technological resources, they are able, without our intervention, to be tapping on the kind of affordances that technology provides us. However, the ones that do not have these resources, they will face a greater climb and they will face greater impediments, and that's exactly where both the digital divide as well as the educational inequities will become further exacerbated if we do not really ride on the principles that we have got to try and reach this group of marginalized students. So indeed, principle one is very, very important. The second principle is that we must invest and expand investment in free, publicly available, high-quality digital learning resources. If we do believe in the power of education technology, there are accelerating access to high-quality resources to students, to teachers, to the communities around the students, including the most marginalized ones, will make a difference. But it is when we are able to reach them only if these resources can be pervasively available. And it must, of course, be free, because cost must not become the prohibitive factor. And hopefully, these resources must be high quality, that will cater to the exact need of the students, that we can make a direct impact and a direct impact on the outcomes of the teaching and learning process. That moves us very quickly, therefore, to the third very important principle, and that is that we must think about the pedagogical capacity as a means to maximize the digital teaching and learning opportunities. Technology cannot replace the teachers. Technology cannot be a substitute for teachers. The teachers who are doing good work can have their good work amplified by technology. And hopefully through technology, we can use the technology to spread good pedagogical practices and innovation. So technology, therefore, as a principle, is an enabler, but only when used appropriately. And when we want change to happen in this area, we will have got to invest effort in building pedagogical capacity and promoting pedagogical innovation so that this can tap maximally the affordances that education technology can provide us, so that we can further digital learning to the maximum effect. So on that note, these three principles, I hope that you will acknowledge that they're equally important. And on these three principles, we build some of the recommendations around the discussion paper, which is its base. So over to you, Verna.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wong. And good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Verna Lalbihari, and I'm the Executive Director for the EdTech Hub. And I have to say, it's been an honor and a privilege to engage alongside both Greece and Singapore in working on track 4, on this action track. So, Mr. Wong, I do want to underscore one thing that you said that is beyond my talking points, but I think is really important to share, and that there is no piece of technology that will replace the art of teaching. So keeping that front and center, I think, is really important. So to actualize the principles outlined by my colleague, our discussion paper puts forth 3 recommendations. And one very important overarching, or what we call a cross-cutting recommendation, recognizing again that fostering digital transformation really requires education systems to undergo rapid and significant change. The initiatives under this track move us beyond current practices and emphasize enhanced education outcomes for all children. With this in mind, the undergirding all our recommendations is a commitment to assuring the digital well-being, safety, rights of learners and educators. While enhancing knowledge of how technology can best support learning, we need to ensure that throughout the process, the well-being, safety, and rights of learners and educators are not jeopardized. This entails, of course, putting in place a variety of policies, programmatic, and processes to ensure that learners and educators are protected. Examples include establishing robust privacy guarantees, developing and enforcing regulations that help and assure that digital spaces are safe, and very importantly, making sure that we train our learners and educators so that they too can be responsible consumers of digital content and engage in the wider digital space more safely. As a guiding ethic, online safety, privacy, mental health must be addressed in parallel to digital integration and not as an afterthought. So I'm going to move then into recommendation 1, which is ensuring connectivity and digital learning opportunities for all. A key benefit of digital learning is that it has the potential to support anytime, anywhere access to education for learners, teachers, and families. However, for this to occur, as you all know, many education stakeholders still require support to access connectivity and digital learning opportunities. So we must begin to move towards ubiquitous connectivity, ideally with an internet connection that is universally available, both at school and at home. This will open greater possibilities for education and really facilitate both formal and informal learning opportunities. It will also generate data that can then lead to evidence-based decision-making at scale, at a system level, which is really important to move the needle on student learning. In order to achieve this goal, countries should define what meaningful digital connectivity for education looks like and means in their context. So it should be content specific, setting those contextualized targets, accompanied, of course, by very important implementation plans, action. How do we bring these targets to life? It is crucial that financing for connectivity does not displace already limited and much needed education spending by governments and/or donors. Our second recommendation is to build and maintain robust, free, public digital learning content and platforms. Authentic access to high-quality education content can be transformative and requires two very interrelated pieces to be available and accessible by both educators and students. One is the content itself, so robust, rigorous, high-quality digital content. And two are the platforms that make this content accessible and, very importantly, easy to use. When developing high-quality content, governments and providers should ensure that materials are curriculum-aligned, are interoperable and not tied to one specific platform, are freely available and affordable, and very important, are differentiated, including for those students with disabilities. Likewise, I mentioned the platforms are really important as well, and having some foundational standards that all should adhere to are really critical. Standards include things like being user-friendly, being intuitive, building on existing digital infrastructure, and being accessible on a wide variety of devices, especially mobile phones. And of course, being optimized for both online and offline learning. The development of both these elements will help facilitate better access to digital resources for all educators and children. Finally, recommendation 3 is to focus on how technology can enhance learning by enabling evidence-based educational practices at scale. We already know a lot about what good teaching and learning looks like and how to support high-quality learning. Digital learning investments have the potential to amplify these good practices. Tech-enabled initiatives that have the most potential to support high-quality learning are those that align with robust evidence base and effective learning strategies and pedagogy. So examples include mother tongue instruction, teacher coaching, formative assessment, structured pedagogy, and of course, teacher reflection. At the same time, digital learning can also facilitate instructional approaches that are not possible without technology. This is particularly the case for the most marginalized learners. Ensuring digital learning is designed to promote inclusion of all learners, including refugees and those forcibly displaced. Learners with disabilities and women are a key part of empowering learners through the use of technology. Finally, and where I started again, is the importance of the classroom teacher. The systematic capacity development of education personnel at multiple levels must be core to digital learning and is key to ensuring that digital learning will have meaningful and sustainable impact on learning outcomes. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, both of you, for that insightful presentation and with the important remarks you have made. I now will give the floor to Ms. Adriana. Thank you so much. I will give the floor to Ms. Adriana Elizabeth Figueredo Costera, who's a Duffy Scholar and Tertiary Refugee Student Network Regional Leader. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Figueredo. I'm a refugee living in Mexico, and I have been part of Duffy program as refugee student, and it was really helpful for getting my degree in international relations. and also had the opportunity to involve in digital education because when COVID hit all of us, we were sent home, and my university provides us the platform for us to learn online and to have the opportunity to finish our education. I actually presented my final exam for the university online. And yeah, I know it's a great tool, but I also know that I'm part of the lucky one group because I know that for many refugee students, this is not possible. I also know that an estimated 78% of all school-age refugee learners have had limited action to no action access at all to learning opportunities during school closures. This is because in so many places, in so many communities of our refugee students, we don't have the access to energy, we don't have the access to internet, we don't have the training to use this digital infrastructure. So we don't have the tools to have access to this education, digital education, sorry. Also, there's a gap between the people who knows how to use these resources and the people who doesn't. So we have to make sure we bridge this gap, providing skill and knowledge so we can avoid this situation. Also, digital education is an excellent source. I had the opportunity to have more teachers because we were before really closed with it. But with digital education, we got access to many teachers and resources that were not available before in my local university, which was really great. And it's an amazing tool that we need to use. But again, I'm part of the lucky ones because as refugees, we don't have access to these tools. And I know that an easy solution might, okay, let's create a program for refugee students. Let's give them the opportunity to learn and let's create trainings and special programs for them or for us. But that's just the simple solution because we are facing gaps every single day and we are fighting these gaps in our daily basis. But let's not create a new gap for us. Let's just incorporate refugees, and not only refugees, also minorities and marginalized communities as refugees, refugee students, girls and learners with disabilities into the central into the central of the national programs that already exist or that we are creating in order to close the gaps and to avoid to create a new one. And from the youth side, we are doing our part by advocating and by talking and making awareness, but we need you as government to take the actions needed to create and to bring high quality education for refugee students as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adriana, for sharing your thoughts with us. And if I may say so, you're not only lucky, you are efficient too. And now we have another speaker who unfortunately cannot be with us, cannot join us today, Ms. Kumbu Boli Bari, who's Special Rapporteur on the right to education. She has sent us a video message.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ministers, all protocols observed. Again, I would like to congratulate the UN and UNESCO for having carried out this wonderful initiative regarding transforming education. It is fair to recognize that in this transforming education process, we must first think about what kind of a society we want. Do we want societies that are humane, pacifist, resilient? Do we want societies in which each and every citizen has the right to live in accordance with their identity, but also in respect with other people and in harmony with others, in harmony with nature and the environment? Do we want these societies where each and every citizen can recognize their own culture and can value his own culture and other cultures? I think that's the first principle, because education is all about human values. We must found our humanity in values. We also need, I'd also like to share the outcomes of my report on digitizing education. Simply, I'd like to say that in this report, I say that I fear rising inequalities given digitization in education. I am particularly stricken by the concerns that I have with education, because there are key advantages but also key dangers. It can also reinforce exclusion rather than reduce it. It can also go against personalized education, and it can also go against diversity. It can also reduce autonomy and freedom rather than promoting creativity. It can lead to data exploitation to the profit of a few, to the detriment of collective public interest. In practice, this means that digitization in education is and will be an advantage that we can leverage, but it may only privilege a few. For many others, digital in education, this may come a cheap fix that means that only the bare minimum will be taught to students and will not promote their creativity and will not promote their full participation in society. This is why I'm making recommendations, ladies and gentlemen. It is important that digital be considered as a tool that must be deployed in conjunction with the right to education, with acceptance, adaptability, but also accessibility and adequacy with the means that we have at our disposal, and of course in respect with human rights. I think that's the only way digital can be deployed in a democratic way, and for it to be truly at the service of humanity and to our diverse societies. Ladies and gentlemen, sincerely, I would like to insist on the fact that to transform education on a global level, we need to change narratives. We need to create and build strong societies. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for participating, and I think our participants, before leaving the floor, deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much. Now, I invite our distinguished ministers and deputy ministers to please get up and join me on stage. The Minister of Education of Egypt, the Minister of Education of Finland, the Minister of Education of Guyana, the first Deputy Minister of Higher and Secondary Special Education of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Please join the floor. Egypt, the Minister of Egypt is the first one, and then Finland, Guyana, and Uzbekistan. And I think that Mr. Hunizao, Secretary General of ITU, can join the stage at the moment, yes? Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with a lot of my friends and great company. Let me tell you in 10 seconds my personal relationship with technology, because I think it's relevant. I used to teach engineering back in the 90s, and I was in the States, and at the birth of the technology that we know today. The first browsers came out in '94, and as a professor, I really was excited to use it in my classroom, and I started learning how to do that and write HTML and do my own complex courses online. There was no infrastructure then. Life was different. That's about 28 years ago now. And later I joined UNESCO, and I spent 13 years here working in the communication information sector. Over this time, technology moved a lot. We had lots of discussions, and I was concerned about ICT in education, science, and culture. Then I went home to Egypt, and I was recruited by our current president as an advisor back in 2014 to reimagine education in Egypt. And the vision we had was, we were inspired actually by Finland, and I told my colleague Lee Anderson from Finland how inspired we were. We even used the same name. We wanted our new education system to be called Education 2.0, like the Finnish experience, although the environment in Egypt is very different, and you can't copy and paste. You have to customize and attend to local problems. So the way we integrated technology was not because of COVID, it was much earlier than that. We wanted to leapfrog our system. Our vision was to transform the society. We wanted an Egyptian society, learning society. To learning for life, facilitating learning, making knowledge available for all, ensuring equity. So I'll share with you, if you allow me in a few minutes, one of the projects. As we speak today, we have a huge spectrum of concrete solutions. So I'm just giving you an example from one country, how we handled the problems. Today, we are building new curricula. We're having brand new education system with technology integration from the beginning, not from early grades, but from grade 4 and above. Not before that. We have banks of questions, we have exam platforms, we have devices in the hands of high schoolers, we have TV stations, YouTube channels, Netflix for education. And the project that sits at the center of that, we call it the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. And actually, the idea, which was adopted by the political leadership, this photo is the president of Egypt hosting CEOs of knowledge houses around the world. We brought together big names like Springer Nature, like Elsevier, like Clarivate, like Wiley, like McGraw-Hill, Britannica, Discovery. The idea was to bring the knowledge of the world, the state of the art, to enlighten the society, put it in one basket, and have a national huge digital library. We wanted a society that learns, thinks, and innovates. And the first step was to bring knowledge to everybody. So that was sponsored by the state. We built one of the top largest digital libraries around the world that serves a lot of purposes. It serves basic education, higher education and research, kids, and general readership. For basic education, we started in 2017 creating bespoke material to serve the new curricula and existing curricula. And we have distributed devices to all our high school students, about 3 million of them, for free. Why? Because we wanted equity. We call it knowledge justice, that every student, poor or rich, should access the same content, the same very high quality content. So for basic education, we have developed a lot of curricula, a lot of digital learning objects, all sorted out and matched with learning outcomes, subject by subject, year by year. We really spent the time to do that. But for higher education, we collected the journal archives and ebooks and databases and search engines from around the world in one basket. Those icons, I know some of them are very small, they have everything from engineering to medicine to economics to law to psychology, and it's in Arabic, English, and French. Those are huge collections. I think if we put them in print in a building, they could be a bit larger than the Library of Congress. And this is a huge, huge collection that is made available for free to over 120 million citizens. Anybody can access this for free inside Egypt. For general readership, we made sure that we have material that serves all ages and all disciplines. For kids, we have a lot of material for kids. We worked with Discovery Education, with National Geographic, and with others to provide kids with STEM-related material, with reading, with learning languages, and so on. So it's a very interesting project that started in 2015, so it's now in its 7th year. And from an IT perspective, it's a complex system because we have like 35 different sources of information, and to search across that variety of clouds and so on, we built a very complex search engine. I don't want to bother you with details of that, but just to tell you it exists. Searching here is very complicated. A kid can search. We're trying to teach kids in Egypt about how to search for information, how to get credible information. They know that from 4th grade. In the new curricula, we teach them how to authenticate what they find, and that you must have a reference. And this is different than the Wikipedia and other sources. These are reviewed materials. So everything in that knowledge bank is reviewed, very credible, and we can navigate through the links. We have also big data here. We know how the users go around, what they look for. The Egyptian society downloaded about 400 million journal articles in the last few years. It's not just in the universities. So this has really enlightened people. Imagine anybody can do that. We have photos of kids who are barefooted in the farms, have devices that we give them for free and access this material. And we are hoping we get Nobel Prize winners from those young people who get this privilege. Now, Thinky is a bespoke learning management system. I'm just trying to quickly get you over it. We have assembled all curricula from KG, from kindergarten until grade 12, subject by subject, lesson by lesson on this platform. For each learning outcome, we have hundreds of digital learning objects commissioned from names like Britannica, like National Geographic, like Wolfram Mathematics, like DesignMate, and so on. We really took the time to do that. And this platform is very customizable. We tailor it to our needs. We can use it to create material, to conduct exams, to do online courses in basic education and in higher education. This is just a quick glimpse of how the learning management system looks. This is what everyone in Egypt uses, from kids, from moms, to researchers in research centers and in universities. These are lessons by Britannica in different languages for chemistry that kids use. The higher education, this system is implemented in 27 universities in all fields. So you can imagine the volume of content that is emerging. The courses in pre-university and in higher education are all assembled here, and we make sure they exist in 3 languages. So we have online assessment. I can tell you in the last 3 years, we conducted 60+ million electronic tests for kids before and during COVID. We were able to reach them in an infrastructure like in Egypt. We were able to do so and get them exams at home and in coffee shops and in school. Last week only, we'd conducted 11 million exams for grades 10 and 11. We reach kids online and offline with this. They can access it by mobile phones. We can also train teachers and reward them through the same platform. Look at talent and workforce planning, connect learning outcomes in pre-university and in higher education and competencies. This is another platform. So what I'm trying to tell you is we have a complete set of layers here, an ecosystem that emerged over 7 years that can do everything from research funding to ebook publishing to course documentation to curriculum documentation, all in one place. But even parallel to that, I don't want to get you into technical details, but parallel to that, we have developed banks of questions, 3 TV channels to reach people who don't have internet, using satellite or even simple antennas. So we just want knowledge in the hands of everybody. And we managed to do that with 25 million of our kids, regardless of their economic situation or where they live, and the infrastructure. So I'm just telling you, it can happen, and it can happen in spite of difficulties and in spite of lack of resources, if the will is there and if we use the technology in the right way. Of course, when COVID-19 hit, it helped us a lot to not disrupt school for a single day. Education in Egypt has moved on through COVID, and no one was, I mean, we minimized the damage as much as possible because we invested in those tools, and now we're trying to share that with many of our neighbor countries in the region and in Africa. And this morning there was a talk by Stefania about Campus Africa, and I think it would be a pleasure for Egypt to share that with our African neighbors and Arab world, and with the world at large, actually. And there are many digital libraries around the world. I think it's time to kind of put our hands together. And so it's just an example of one implementation of technology through which we were able to solve a lot of problems, and hope to do more after all these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for sharing with us your experience and vision. And now the floor is yours, Minister. I think we need another microphone, if someone can help us. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, of course, I want to thank for the invitation and also congratulate the co-chairs for drafting the discussion paper for Transforming the Education Summit. I think that the 3 recommendations of the paper to us on public digital learning resources, on the potential of technology to accelerate and support learning, and the third one to ensure connectivity for all, they provide a good focused priority list for all of us. In this situation, of course, we also need to take into account everything that we learned and experienced during the pandemic. In many ways, it was a huge leapfrog in digital and blended learning, but I think that it also gave us some very important lessons about what worked and what did not work so well when we talk about digitalization and technology in education. For policymakers, it's our shared challenge to harness technology for ensuring inclusive, high-quality education. As was stated, sadly, the pandemic also made it very clear that we do have massive digital divides, not only between countries, but within societies and within all societies, also most developed nations, also in Finland, we noticed this. So addressing these divides, addressing this kind of these divisions must be our first priority when moving forward. At its best, digitalization can help us make education more accessible. It can help us kind of broaden the horizon of education, help us create new opportunities to diversify our learning environments. But we do need to pay constant attention to avoid creating new gaps, and instead all the time think about how we improve inclusion and equity when we talk about learning materials, devices, connectivity, but also support for our learners, which was the one thing that we learned in Finland during the pandemic that we really need to focus on. So therefore, as the discussion paper proposes, we must design our digital systems with the most marginalized and with in mind, and putting learning first, remembering that technology must always be at the service of learning. So it can never replace our teachers, it cannot replace our schools, which we now have seen are so important not only for learning, but also for the well-being of all children and students. Another point that I want to make is the role of teachers. Very central, their pedagogical expertise is the foundation for developing learning innovations, and they should also be given a voice in deciding what kind of tools they need and want for their job. In Finland, our education policy and model puts a lot of trust in teachers. They are highly educated, they are motivated professionals, so they also get a lot of autonomy and freedom in choosing their learning methods and their learning materials. And their capacity to create and innovate was very pivotal in limiting the impact of school closures in Finland. We've also found that various models for competence development that are based on peer support are very effective in strengthening teachers' digital competences. So teachers teaching teachers. Virtually all comprehensive schools in Finland have a tutor teacher tasked to support their colleagues in using technology in education in a pedagogically meaningful way. And it's of course also very important that we pay attention in teachers' continuous professional development throughout their careers to be able to support them in this. And we should also seek best practices globally when it comes to continuous professional development. Just a short example, I visited a Finnish school some weeks ago where a teacher told me how he uses the game Minecraft in various subjects that he teaches. And one that stuck with me was he said that he inspires boys 9 to 10 to read books, because after they finish reading, they are tasked to create a scenery from the book through the game of Minecraft, and then send it to their teacher afterwards. Just a very short example of teachers' creativity when it comes to games and digital learning environments. To end, dear friends, ensuring that our systems are inclusive, of course, it's important to understand that access is a multifaceted challenge. We need to build global public goods, open educational resources. And I wish to underline the importance of UNESCO's global recommendation on open educational resources. It's visionary and more relevant than I think anybody was able to predict at the time of its adoption, which was shortly before the COVID outbreak. It was also an important inspiration for us in Finland when we established a national library of open educational resources. Highly useful during the pandemic, and also helps teachers to freely share and adapt materials, so they can both load their own materials and use materials from this resource. This discussion paper at hand recommends, and rightly so, establishing such public repositories. And in our view, they can be used not only for accumulating materials, but really become hubs for sharing innovative pedagogical practices and for supporting our teachers in the everyday work that they do with our children in schools. To end, Finland really looks forward to learning about best practices around the world. We stand ready to share ours in order to support UNESCO and the UN in promoting these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for your inspired speech and for the kind words you have said about those who worked hard the last months. Now, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. What are the truths we know pre-COVID? We know that 2/3 of the world's children have no connectivity at home. We know that millions upon millions have no access to devices. Recently, a research suggests strongly that 1 out of every 3 adults globally have very low digital literacy, so low that they don't know how to copy and paste. That's pre-COVID. Post-COVID, we learned some more truths. That the dream that we had before COVID, that technology would solve all of our learning deficiencies and fill all the gaps, was a myth. We learned what our colleague from Singapore said, that the premier method of teaching and learning is still face-to-face education. But another truth is that there is so much scope for the expansion and support and complementing of the system through technologies. The truth we could not escape from across countries is the inequities when we use technology. Those are the truths. These are the facts. We cannot escape them. So where do we go from here? I believe the conversation around the world has to pay rapt attention to bridging the gaps, particularly the inequity gap. This is commendable, so I commend UNESCO for having this meeting and the UN Secretary General for convening the summit that will happen in September. There is and could be a slight flaw, but an important flaw in these kinds of meetings. We could be talking to ourselves. The education ministers know very well, forcefully, how much it is necessary to fund and fund appropriately transformation of education. But we're talking to education ministers and with education ministers. I think the good that comes out of this is that the high-level UN Secretary General Summit in September aims to see IFIs, the international financial institutions, the presidents and heads of states, ministers of finance. But we need to be having a wider conversation on changing the financial architecture and how education is funded. I am hearing now, post-COVID, and I heard throughout the pandemic when we were at our strongest, neediest place, the place where we had the strongest need, IFIs still speaking the language of we cannot only do technological inputs. We cannot only make, we must do and accompany that with other things that present a fuller picture on paper. There is no longer any need to pilot whether technology is important in education. I think what we know that now, that is a truth. What we also know is that we have to do what Egypt has done. Any kind of input must reach every child, or we will be measuring for a long time to come how that inequity and the continuing inequities affect us as a whole. So changing the financial architecture of funding in education has to be a priority for the world and all the institutions that respond to needs. The other important thing, and I specifically see, so I didn't necessarily have this as a priority, but I see Huawei and Ericsson and other companies here. How do we balance as a world the need to encourage innovation that comes and is motivated by private sector input with the understanding that education is a public good and must be available to mass numbers of persons? Because something we learned in this time when we were closed for schools is that the people who could afford it, the people who could add to the profit margins, and there's nothing wrong with profit margins, but it cannot be the primary and premier consideration when we're talking about education as a public good. if we saw very clearly how persons and privatization of education, the people who could afford, were able to, we're still doing the numbers, but we're probably more able to minimize the learning loss and minimize the harm from school closures. So how do we make sure we encourage and promote innovation that comes with motivation from the private sector, and balance that with our global and universal understanding that education is and needs to be a public good and is a right to each child, regardless of economic, social, geographical circumstances. So those are some hard conversations that we need to have openly. In Guyana, we have done a few things. Because the connectivity is a huge problem and access to devices is a huge problem, we have used the television. So we have a dedicated television channel to learning, and we've just expanded it to 6 channels to create, produce, and publish content that is ours, so that it's available to all and there are no copyright issues on them. That channel also publishes all of its work across grade levels, nursery all the way to secondary, high school, on YouTube. So those who can access the internet can get it. We've also partnered with, another way we've gone is to partner with established places like Pro Futuro, where all of our teachers, all save none, were exposed to and offered the opportunity to do free courses in use of innovation and technology. So retrain our entire teaching force. In fact, Guyana is the largest user in that part of the region. We've also taken the entire training college, teacher training college, fully online. Not solely online, because we can't do that as yet, but fully online. So we know for sure that the teachers who are going to come out of the training college henceforth will all be literate in the usage of technology in learning and teaching. We're also consulting, and just to come to this meeting, we have 2 young people here with us. Samuel Haynes, who actually is the most outstanding student in the Caribbean for the exit level examination. Samuel, stand. And this is all of the Caribbean at the Cape level. And we have a young teacher, Hansrani Budni. And they can tell you very clearly. And she's a young teacher from a remote riverine area. And they can tell you with clarity, very articulately, exactly what the system needs. And if you were to summarize what they're to say, they are very sure that we have to find more interesting and diverse ways of delivering information. And the one very studied and researched way is through technological tools and means. And so we are not unsure anymore as a world, and we certainly are not as a country, about where we have to go. Can we support that, and can we move forward together, would be a question that will determine what the future of our systems and the future of our world looks like.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your truthful and helpful remarks. I'm afraid we have to speed up and ask everyone to be as brief as possible. Minister Karimov, the floor is yours.
Ms. Macri, thank you very much. And I wish also to thank organizers for inviting us and for providing this opportunity to speak. I wish to thank my colleagues in the panel for sharing the very insightful ideas and examples from different countries. So, colleagues, as we speak about transforming education, I think it's very difficult to underestimate the power of digital technology, and I'm sure there is a consensus in this room that it is a very powerful tool actually to transform our education systems, right? So, but I like one comparison, you know, as we speak about education, I recently heard the comparison of education system to an oil tanker. You know, so it's also huge and it is very difficult to turn, right? And it takes a lot of time actually to make this change happen. This is reality, and we have to face with it, right? But again, I believe if we not just speak about this digital the transformation, but if we invest into this, the change in the system, transformation in our education systems will probably accelerate. So it's not, of course, a panacea, but again, I will stress on this. This is a very powerful tool to make that change happen. And I think the discussion paper which was presented to us today very boldly focuses on that, right? And I wish to thank the authors of this paper because they have done a great job. Actually, they're making a very good analysis, making very good recommendations to all of us. But one thing, of course, I think more or less clear for all of us in this room what needs to be done to make this digital transformation happen, right? But the more difficult question, how we do it. And I was focusing on each speaker today, and many people spoke what needs to be done, you know, but I really heard very few ideas how we do it actually, because again, there is a consensus about the digital divide, and my colleague from Finland, Ms. Anderson, has mentioned about, you know, within the countries, within the regions, we have this. But one thing, we also have this divide, which is important in the context of education. We have this divide between generations as well. Obviously, young people, they now born with their devices, right? So they probably much easygoing with new technologies. But in our education systems, our teachers, our providers, right? They mainly, they have obviously problems with using of this the new technology. So this intergenerational divide is something we also need to consider. And in that sense, I think another important aspect is this lifelong learning concept. Because we don't really, as we speak about digital transformation, if we're serious about this, it's not just schools or our universities, but there should be an approach that will target the older generation as well. So otherwise, I don't think we can reach our goals. And another thing, of course, we have seen even in this, during these 2 days, in the corridors of UNESCO, we have seen very good examples of how the digital technologies can accelerate the learning process. Very advanced, you know, virtual, augmented realities, and so on and so on. It's good, but those are, and I'm sure in all the countries presented here, we have good examples. In some countries more, in some countries less, but I'm sure all of us have those good examples. But how we scale this up? That is an important question, right? Especially as we have these divides, and that is not the only problem we have, and I think it was very well focused in the discussion paper. We have a problem with the qualification of our teachers, we have content issues, we have infrastructure problems, so how we actually address those, yeah? And of course, when it comes to infrastructure, I believe, and as we represent the governments here, ministers, it's a government role. Because I don't think any private company will, you know, focus on that, you know, providing the good infrastructure for entire countries. That is obviously the role of government to create and enable infrastructure for our learning institutions, for our schools, for our universities, and so on. And that is what is happening in Uzbekistan. We have very ambitious plan actually to provide broadband, high-speed internet to all our learning institutions from preschool up to university level, and that is done by government. So, but when it comes to technology, when it comes to the content, I think here we know this very well. The huge role actually lies on the private and transnational companies, right? So because they are the owners of the intellectual properties, they are the owners of the applications, and they are the ones actually who has a huge stake in this business. And therefore, without engaging the private sector, and especially those big names, which I will try to avoid, of course, today, without engaging those big names, I don't think this transformation will happen again. So it's therefore, it's very important that we engage with them. And I like the idea of my colleague Verna. She was speaking about free access, global free access to internet. This is great, of course, but who is going to do that, right? So it's, again, it's a huge investment, and without this private partnership, this is, I don't think this is going to happen. So therefore, as we sitting here in UNESCO, the international organizations should, I think, more closely engage with those big names. And it's seen that the Huawei is present here today, but we need others to be on board and actually to share this responsibility for our future. So there are many other things, of course, and given the time limitations, I'm unfortunately will not be able to highlight all of those. But one example from Uzbekistan, because I represent this country here, we have very ambitious plans in our country. We want to build a digital nation, and we have our long-term strategy how we do it. And of course, it's about e-government, it's about digital economy, but a very important part in all of this plays the education, right? So, and we have in country the program which is called 1 Million Coders. And through this, the ambitious program, we aim to train at least 1 million young people in coding, right? And it's free for them to learn very basic coding skills. Government actually subsidizes this learning process, and it is not just learning, it is certified program, and with the certificate they have, I'm sure will have much easier access to find a job, which is also very important for our young people. So this is just one example I would like to share with you. There are many others, of course, but I, again, was inspired by different the examples which I have seen during these 2 days. And again, I wish to thank my colleagues for this. But again, I believe that if we join hands together, that the transformation of our education systems will become a reality. So thank you very much for your attention, colleagues.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. The floor is yours, Secretary General. But please, I'm afraid I have to remind once more that we are running out of time, and be as brief as you can. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, I'm very pleased to join you here, because I actually tried to see you in IT activities. I could not see many ministers of education with our activities. So then I said, why don't you come to Paris to see you? So today, thanks to the moderator who put my speech at the end rather at the beginning. If at the beginning, I will give you a lot of information, what is important of ICT to education, but now you all talked about that. So I don't need to repeat those messages. So that saves some time. I would like to concentrate on 2 issues. One is what IT is doing, actually, to contribute to this summit. Transformation Education Summit, in my opinion, without introduction of ICT, without using ICT, this will not be a real transformation. And everybody recognize that, and all the ministers talk about that. So I don't need to repeat. But from ITU, we this year had 2 important meetings. In March, we had the World Telecommunications Standardization Assembly, where we invited our industry leaders and industry experts to have close cooperation with universities, with the researchers of universities, and invited them to join us at our main activities of standardization making process. I give you one example, that today you use any virtual platform, Teams, Zooms, any Skype, or anything you like, without the ITU standard for video coding, developed in 1990s, none of this system can work. Any smartphone also using that system. But that video coding was developed in 1990 with a lot of professors from universities who join us. And one of the famous one is Thomas from Berlin University. And we consider that this kind of potentials of new technology development with engagement of our universities will be beneficial to our business, so that we encourage our members of ITU to have close cooperation with the universities. And we develop so-called ICT Discovery magazine to reach universities, to reach university students, professors. We also organize college prep activities to invite the university to join us annually. And we did have more than 100 universities to join us regularly. And we also invite the university to join ITU as ITU Academy member since the year 2011. We have now more than 170 universities there. Tashkent University is one of them. It's already there for 10 years. And at the beginning, it's a personal push from my side. I try to get a university close to us. And then to have free access is wonderful. But free membership may not be that nice. I talked with principals, president of universities at the beginning of this century. If free means a free commitment. So they said, you know, if you have 2,000, 3,000, it would be nice. So we fixed a membership of 3,000 Swiss francs, 3,000 US dollars. Actually, it's 2,000 from developing countries. University can join us free, all activities. And then university from developed countries, we have put about 4,000. So this kind of engagement, we really are pleased to see so many universities join us. So we'd like to also share this information with you. We welcome you to join us. And then we have another important conference just finished in Kigali in June. We call the World Telecom Development Conference, where we passed a resolution to encourage ITU members, particularly ICT ministers, to focus on efforts to connect the schools, to connect every schools, to connect every youth by ICT. And they agreed. We have a resolution. Now I'd like to convey this message to you, ask our Minister of Education to cooperate with our Minister of ICT and the ICT industry to make sure that the youth will be connected and the schools will be connected. So this main message I'd like to share with you, and I know that our moderator is very nervous, so let me just stop here and to try to once more again express our wish to stay with you, to go together with you for the better the education system, for the better life of human beings. And that is my message I'd like to just share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, for these crucial thoughts and reflections. But this discussion would not be inclusive if we don't consider our partners' actions, and that is why I invite Ms. Zora Yermeche, who's Program Director of Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility from Ericsson, and Ms. Afke Shart from Huawei. She is the Senior Vice President of Global Government Affairs. Can you come on stage and sit next to the ministers? There's one chair here and the other one is there for you. Thank you. Ms. Yermeche, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today as one of the voices of the private sector to share our perspective on what needs to change and what we need to do as a concerted community to put education back on track and to leave no one behind. We've heard from the distinguished speakers before me so eloquently about the urgency to address the issue of equitable and sustainable access to quality education for all, and the role that technology can play as an accelerator of that effort. We've also heard the past few days, couple of days, from the youth. Also, for instance, this morning, there was a strong message from a young lady sharing how she was terrified about the future and that we needed to act today. In an ideal world, we should hear a message of hope from all our youth. We've also heard from another young person about the importance of focusing our efforts on the most marginalized, refugees, girls, children with disabilities. These are important messages for us. So what needs to be done is today quite clear to all. We have great frameworks out there. An example is the Rewired Global Declaration on Connectivity for Education that provides recommendations for governments on how to implement digital learning. It's currently being endorsed by governments across the world. So it's no surprise that the declaration carves a big role for connectivity. As an enabler of access to quality education. So I'll be focusing on 2 points from my perspective. It's connectivity or digital connectivity and digital skills. So today, connectivity is the backbone of our societies and our economies. As such, it has become evident for national and global actors that there is a need to have a concerted effort and funding to provide access to internet for all. And the pandemic has only highlighted even more this need, particularly in the education sector. As a leading telecommunication company working in the IT sector, we've seen, from our perspective, and I represent the sustainability part of the company driving our education efforts, an opportunity in leveraging technology to address global challenges, for instance, the one that the education sector is facing. So we've been focusing on how do we use technology for education, how do we use technology to support the education sector, but also how do we learn about technology, so the digital skill component. But one important thing for us is that no matter how good we think we might be at what we do, no one can solve the problem alone. So I would say that from our perspective, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework, SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goal, is the foundational one for us. And from that perspective, we look a lot into partnering with entities, partners across sectors to see how we can join efforts, basically with like-minded organizations, to create that scale and impact. Examples are, we've joined the Global Education Coalition launched by UNESCO, and through that forum, we've been able to partner with a number of organizations to create scale. We've also partnered in 2020 with UNICEF to support the GIGA initiative. GIGA aims to connect all the schools to the internet by 2030. And the ambition is that through that connectivity, every young person is provided access to information, opportunity, and choice. But then what we thought is, what is our role as a private sector, as a technology company? Where can we really bring strong, impact? So we funded UNICEF and the GIGA team, but beyond that, our perspective is that our in-kind contribution is one of the areas where we can best contribute. So we've brought expertise from our engineers, our data scientists, so engineers in AI, machine learning, experts on networks, to help our partners understand the needs on the ground. Where are the schools? Are they connected or not? What would it take to connect these schools? So that then governments and other actors would then be able to fundraise and then ultimately connect these schools. This is one example of how, from our perspective, we looked into how we can complement efforts from other organizations rather than recreate or create our own. So I would say if I have one key message today is to urge the multi-sector partners, particularly the private sector, to ask themselves, how can I contribute? How can I complement or improve on what others are already doing well? Rather than what can I do on myself as an organization, as a country, for instance. And I think we have a good example here with the representation from Huawei and Ericsson. We are two competitors, but at this table, we are here to partner, to work together, to bring the same message, to solve the same problem. So this is maybe one of the messages we bring from the private sector. And there was another message from one of the meetings yesterday where we were told that let's put our egos aside for the good of all and for the good of all our children. Now, on the second aspect, which is the skills, maybe just one point I could add, and I know we don't have much time, is that one of the roles that the private sector can bring to the table is that we have expertise in-house. We train our own people, we upskill our own people. Collaborating with the private sector, with the public sector, for instance, universities, to bring that knowledge and those skills out in the public sphere is one of the activities that we are investing most in today, and we see a strong role for the private sector. And that starts by identifying the skill gaps in the workforce, and beyond that, really helping the education sector address those gaps through microcredits, targeted opportunities for upskilling young adults. And I think with that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Unfortunately, the Minister of Egypt was late for a very important appointment, so he had to leave. The floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor for me to be here this afternoon in your company. And I very much concur what my colleague Sora has been saying from Ericsson. You know, we cannot do this in isolation. Private sector has to work together with NGOs and with governments, you know, to develop and grow our talents. So my name is Afka, and I'm responsible for the global impact programs at Huawei. I'm based in China, in Shenzhen. I'm just here for a few weeks to meet with people, and then I go back to this lovely city. And what I've been learning, you know, since I have this global role here at Huawei, is you know, that is indeed a joint responsibility. And for the private sector, you know, a company like Huawei, we have 200,000 people working for us, and half of them are in research. So mind you, 100,000 people that we have working for us are working in research, you know, and we need to train them. We have to train them already at universities and also at primary and secondary education. So that's why we are also very much involved, and you know, that's also what is our stake to make sure that we grow, you know, people to make sure that they can have a fantastic career in the technology sector. Because if you look at job boards like LinkedIn, for example, you know, you can already see jobs by a company like Huawei in AI, in cloud computing, 5G, 6G. It's already there. You know, those are not the jobs of the future, those are the jobs of today already, you know, so that's important to note. And I think what UNESCO has been doing, and also in one of the recent reports saying that by 2050, 75% of all jobs will be STEM related, you know, it's just very important to note, and we have to act now. And for that, we have different programs that we have in place. And well, we work with UNESCO, Campus UNESCO. We're very proud of that in a lot of countries. We've started that initiative actually, well, last year. And we work there with NGOs and with governments to train people, but also train the teachers, also in times of COVID, when there's no connectivity and you have to be, you know, do your teaching and adapt your skills from remote. So that's what we've been doing there, and we have just started an initiative in Egypt and in a few other countries as well. That is like an open school project for all, and that's also, you know, where we want to invite not only, you know, students from the top universities, but from all, you know, universities and schools, to make sure that they have the skills that are needed to grow and have a career. So the second one that is perhaps most known is our Seeds for the Future project. So that's what we already started in 2008, so quite a long time ago. And that's where we have been training more than 30,000 students from all over the world. And we have committed to that last year again, to spend another 2.5 million euros on that program and train another 5,000 students in the next 3 years. So we do that as well. And we have another project that we've started to work on, and we have announced that last week at the FIFA Tech Summit, and it's a competition, so, we also have to bring in a fun element in doing all these trainings, and these competitions are also for students from universities, but also for, middle school and high school students, and it's also on projects like 5G, cloud computing, but also, solar and automotive, because I think, that's also important to note, and that will be the last point that I would like to add, because I know that we're very short on time, because, it's not only about, technology, but it's about how to also implement and work on other sectors, so renewable sector, but also automotive and ports and you can name it. So every job in the future will be STEM related, and we have to make sure that our people are ready for that, and especially girls, I'm sure that that's been a big topic also in this summit, and that's good. And we're very proud that, especially in the African and Asian regions, that the amount of girls that are engaging in our programs are really, really increasing quite significantly. And our Seeds for the Future program is already now consisting of 30% of females, and a few years ago that was much, much less. So we're very proud of that, and that's especially, a trend that we see in Africa and in Asia. So that's really good to know. Thank you so much, and wish you a very pleasant summit, and good luck to us all.
Thank you. Thank you all for your inspirational thoughts and remarks. And now I would like to move to the concluding part of this session. Thank you all. Thank you very much. I invite Mr. Frank. I invite Mr. Frank van Capelle, who's Senior Advisor, Educational Digital Learning of UNICEF, and Mr. Sobi Tawil, Director, Future of Learning and Innovation, UNESCO, to conclude this session. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Honorable ministers, delegates, and colleagues, it's now lunchtime. I know you're hungry, so let me try to provide some more food for thought, and thank you to those who are still seated here today, even though it's overtime. I want to start expressing my appreciation for the wonderful collaboration that it's been for this Action Track 4 in digital learning. I think this wonderful collaboration started really already during COVID, when we started working together more closely. Ironically, the virtual aspect helped in the collaboration, and that also shows the power of technology. So I want to express appreciation for the UN agencies we're working with, also the governments of Greece and Singapore. And we're also working more closely with the private sector. Ironically, or coincidentally, I should say, my first phone was an Ericsson, my last phone was a Hawaii. So I have a private connection there. A few messages in terms of food for thought. First of all, in terms of the most marginalized, and as UNICEF, that's of course always been our focus. But I want to emphasize that it's not enough to just focus on the most marginalized, to include the most marginalized, to consider. You have to start with the most marginalized and build from the ground up, understanding their realities. And that was one of the biggest mistakes made during COVID, is that we didn't fully appreciate their realities. Trickle down, from the top down, from the most privileged down, from the urban to rural, it hasn't worked so far. And linked to that is also that digital learning is no longer just something about schools. That's a lesson learned from COVID. It's at home, but not just at home. Thanks to our colleagues from UNHCR and the fantastic youth leader earlier, who's a refugee, we now also understand the amazing potential of digital learning for refugees, for children on the move, for displaced children, and there are more today than ever before. And thirdly, it is critical not just to be learner-centered. That's another important lesson, that we don't start with technology, we consider the learners. But another lesson learned, which I think hasn't been fully appreciated, is that that shouldn't just be learner-centered, but also teacher-centered. So I want to thank Mr. Wong and also the honorable ministers from Finland and Guyana, who also emphasized that we need to consider the teachers, technology shouldn't bypass the teachers. It needs to support teachers and help them in their work and help them improve their teaching and complement teaching. And that is something that we have learned. In this summit, we heard a lot about youth, the voices of youth, which have been some of the most powerful and some of the most inspirational. But how many teachers are here? I think there was one teacher I just heard who is in this room. I think we could also listen more to teachers and not just to youth. Both are very important to include, I think, in our thinking, in our considerations. Finally, reflecting back on some of the points made by the honorable ministers of Uzbekistan and Guyana, is that the process is difficult. Digital learning, digital transformation, it is not the solution, it is part of the solution. It's a critical part of the solution, especially now with the learning crisis that we are facing. But doing so is hard, and the tricky part is going beyond the policies, the strategies, the words that we are, the spoken words during this summit, and going to the implementation, the how, the funding, how are we going to finance it, how are we actually going to practically implement it, how do we ensure that it's implemented at the school level and doesn't just rest at the government or the ministerial, at the national level. That is one of the very difficult problems that we hope to solve, and I think we need to really work together to that. On that, we've been calling it a coalition for action, and I think that's one of the critical parts, one of the critical next steps. And just to conclude with some words from a youth leader yesterday, which I thought were very appropriate. We need to start with transformation yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Director, Saul, has the floor now. Thank you, sir.
Just to start by, I'll be quick. First, a word of thanks for all the panelists, all the speakers, to Greece and Singapore, the EdTech Hub as co-leads, and our colleagues in the UN, UNICEF, ITU, the World Bank, UNHCR, for all the work that has brought us together. The key word is really around collective intelligence, and the work that has been done by the Action Track builds on the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. It builds on the report of the International Commission on the Futures of Education, and it builds more specifically on the global rewired declaration on connectivity for education. And I think today was an excellent example of bringing together also that what we need going forward, looking at the summit in September, is to bring in the specific expertise and the experience of the diversity of partners on the how. Just to tie this, and this is my final word, and then I'll have a housekeeping announcement to make, but to tie this to the discussion on transforming education and the Transforming Education Summit more broadly, there is no transformation of education without addressing the root causes of social exclusions. And one manifestation of those social exclusions is the digital divide. And addressing that from the technical dimension goes beyond the education sector. But I think this is one message we can take more broadly, looking across the thematic tracks. There's no transformation of education without addressing the root causes of educational exclusion. And with what concerns us with digital learning, that's the issue or the manifestation of the digital divide. Second, there's no transformation of education without transformative teaching and learning. So we need a transformation of teaching and learning. And the two principles that we have heard from the discussion paper have to do with digital learning content, has to do with exploiting the full pedagogical capacities offered by digital technologies in teaching and learning. And third, there's no transformation of education without transformation of the governance of education. Considering digital learning content, they have to be considered part of the global digital commons. We need to commit to democratic, participatory governance, protection of data privacy. And so these are all aspects that we see cutting across all the thematic tracks and with the and our focus today on the digital learning. So I just wanted to tie that into the broader efforts around transformation and what might be expected in September as key elements of transformation of education. Finally, an announcement, housekeeping, just to say ministerial videos will be screened in room 1 at 2:45. And in room 11, currently is a side event on digital open schools. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and thank you for the moderation.
Thank you, sir. I could not agree more with what you said, and all that discussed today give promise to an exciting lead-up to the Transforming Education Summit. I thank you all for your participation, presence, and patience.